personal experiences or stories where you've witnessed the influence of saboteurs on individuals or teams?
I think I'll start as an educator from primary all the way to higher ed. And I've had touch points, be it literacy, be it writing, be it social sciences, from primary all the way to higher ed. A lot of the work is driven by benchmarks, data, testing, academic rigor, mastery, executive functions, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of the work. But when you look at that and you think about what that develops in children, when you just have that framework, so parents really continue to vet and continue to have the conversations about what education looks like for your children. Yes. That's what I say here. However, when you really look at that, and we talk about this whole left brain versus right brain, when we talk about the sage, how do we build the sage within our children? How do we allow this place of empathy, compassion, this place of kindness and generosity and sharing to really thrive within our children and be embedded? And I'm thankful that social and emotional learning and character development, particularly since we became so very distant with the pandemic, I'm glad to see the advent or continuation of this work. But where I've really seen this is as educators now more than ever. There is this hypervigilance in terms of, are our kids safe? Right? And what do I need to do to ensure that our kids are safe? But also we've had some lagging and some loss since the pandemic. So we've got to catch up. And there's this whole grind, this whole hustle, this whole push. Meanwhile, we're asking ourselves, are we enough? Are we doing our best jobs? All of these things. And so I think how I see it show up is in that way, and we're constantly questioning ourselves. Am I enough? And I think that you could see that in any profession, obviously, but am I enough? Am I doing what's enough? And so that's why I think this work is so important. And I think what we're talking about is really, really important, because it really is, when you're talking about education, it's talking about one child at a time.
Yes.
One moment at a time, one moment of kindness, one moment of taking the opportunity to take a break in your class and just say, let's have fun. Yes. Let's dance a little bit, let's smile, let's laugh. Whatever that joy place is, because it should be about joy as well. The joy of learning, inquiry, curiosity, critical analysis, all the fun. And so I'm seeing it show up in some hard ways, but I'm also seeing us as educators lean in and insist on joy, insist on still bringing our best selves to the classroom in innovative ways. And that's the gift to me. So that's the joy. That's why I keep doing it. That's why my daughter Iman is going to do it this fall, because we're hopeful. And that's the sage, right?
That is.
That's the sage.
That's beautiful, Valerie. What about you, Deb?
So to be clear, the question is how our saboteurs have shown up?
So share any personal experiences or stories that you've witnessed the influence of the saboteurs on individuals or teams.
Okay. It was interesting as Valerie was speaking, and I know that I've had like a strong focus on the stickler, but I think especially like in my industry, so very similar to Ramonita being a brand strategist, that and ironically enough, we work at one of the most fun companies in the entire world. But I think sometimes we forget that. We often joke that we're only selling a certain product. We're not saving lives. But I think we place like an immense amount of pressure on people to the point where they are afraid to fail. The fear of failure is sometimes crippling people and keeping them out of the game. And I have seen it personally as, again, like now being a leader in the organization and talking to like several of my direct reports and asking them, like, why won't you, try this or what risk are we doing? Because the company that we work for specifically has received an immense amount of success because like they've always taken risk. They've always gone outside of the box. Like they think very big, but now I think that we're seeing a younger generation that wants to follow a blueprint instead of creating their own path. But I think that comes because they are afraid to take risk and to fail. And I think what I am trying to challenge myself with as a leader is how do you encourage failure a bit more?
Right.
Because
that's where innovation's born.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And quite literally, I used to be a still am, huge history nerd. But when you think of all the inventions that have happened over like the course of history, none of them have happened without someone failing first.
Exactly.
It took an immense amount of failures before they actually got to the product. And even more than that, sometimes failures led to discoveries that they never thought that they would land on. And I think that we have to get to this sort of like childlike faith and this childlike imagination where we find the balance of I am not afraid to take risk. I'm not afraid to figure it out because oftentimes whenever we take risk, I've experienced that we've experienced like the greatest success. And we have to continue to push those around us to not be afraid to go beyond like their comfort zone.
It's like, I love the quote, like, it's like, well, what if we fail? And then someone
Well,
goes like,
what
what
if
if
you
you fly, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What if you soar?
Soar. Come on, wings.
I just recently gave that an acronym, but I'll save it for another time. But what role does self-awareness play in identifying and managing the influence of these saboteurs in your life?
What role does self-awareness?
What role does self-awareness play in identifying and managing the impact?
I think that one of the things that I tell the young women that I mentor from in the classroom for a leadership course for young women is the best journey you can take is the journey to self. The best journey you can take is the journey to self. Everything else makes sense when you have a really good compass of what's going on in here. This is what I've learned. I mean, and you have five core competencies of social emotional learning. And they are self-awareness, self-management, relationship building, responsible decision making, and social awareness. But if you really think about success in relationships, however you define success, success comes from having a very good compass of the inner locale, the inner workings of who I am. I'm able to understand and identify where I am at any given moment, be it feelings of joy, anxiety, whatever it is. If I have a good compass of myself, if I have a good compass of the things that bring me joy or the things that may trigger something else, right? But I think a lot of times we see emotional flailings about because we just don't have this really good core of who I am and how I operate and how I operate in the world around me. And so it's for me, it's been a journey to self is what I call it. And it's not just like a self-involvement where it's all about me. It's not that, me. But it really is being my better self for me and then for the people around me. And then I understand, why does that irritate me? Or why does that bring me great joy? I know that it does, but why?
I think if we're having an honest conversation, self-awareness is like the hardest conversation to have with yourself because it's not.
Let me get your sis your earring.
Thank you.
Go.
Look, just go on and pop it.
Absolutely. There's a look here.
All right. But I think that self-awareness, if we're being honest, is really hard because self-awareness is having the most honest, transparent conversation with yourself. And I think sometimes we are not always honest with ourselves. And I think that there has to be a willingness to accept all facets of you. To be completely honest, when I took the Saboteurs test, there were some that I did not like. I was just like, for me, I was like victim, but then I was like, see, that's why you're the victim.
Me?
Yeah, like
It was somebody else's fault.
right. But then, as you start to reflect on your life and you start thinking about it, and if we're being honest, beyond self-awareness, the next step is talking to your closest, most intimate circle. Mm-hmm. I think that they would affirm a lot of the things that we don't want to admit. Mm-hmm. But I think that you cannot grow if you cannot be honest and if you cannot admit that this is an area of opportunity. And so, like, as you think about like the Saboteurs, like, and you were asking, what is the opportunity for self-awareness, or what role does self-awareness play? I think that self-awareness is like the first step in being honest, transparent, and accepting. So, in actually being open to what Saboteurs are trying to signal to you. So before you can move to the sage phase, because if you don't accept that these things may be true, then you will never be able to improve and will never be able to stop sabotaging yourself.
I love what you said about the community, though. Early on, I had a manager, and he said, feedback is a gift. If only you will see it as that. Oftentimes, I think we look at feedback as a ding on our character, or like criticism, or an attack, right? And I think if we can take that feedback and lean into it, sit with it, to understand what exactly the goal of that feedback is. Only then does it become a gift. But so often we get our feelings hurt. And granted, there's a way to deliver feedback that most people don't know how to deliver feedback, which is another story for another time. But I do think that the feedback is a gift. I would say for me, self-awareness, though, there's nobody that's going to be a harsher critic or give harsher feedback to me than me. Right. I am my harshest critic, and I'm probably oftentimes the harshest critic to the people around me too. Which I gotta ask Deb. You want me to give you this with salt or sugar? Like, I've learned that. I didn't always. I just would always give everyone the salty. We are the salt of the earth. I'm just saying. But it preserves all the other things. It gives flavor. But I say I am my harshest critic, and for me, the restless. Self-awareness comes when I get quiet. It's why I need to rest. We live in a world where we are inundated with noise, with chaos, with things that are telling us this is how you should look, this is how you should be, this is how you should show up, this is where you should be by this age. There are 30 under 30 lists, 40 under 40. I mean, these are the benchmarks. And so we're constantly receiving those messages. When we're constantly trying to measure up to those things, when we're constantly trying to pace ourselves according to what the world is telling us versus our own personal journeys, we become really, really hard on ourselves. And I noticed that it started to trigger anxious thoughts. It started to trigger these feelings of being left behind, forgotten about, which then make me tap into those pleasers, those hyperachievers. Let me clog. Let me climb my way to the top. Let me work harder, be stronger, whatever. And I actually needed to do the opposite to deal with those. I needed to rest. I needed to get quiet. I needed to understand the root. I was in my garden the other day, and as I was pulling out my roots, as I was pruning my, I just felt like I pulled the weed, and I just pulled the top part of it off, and I was like, go deeper, because if you don't pull the root of that, it will grow again. And so we gotta deal with the root causes, and we can only do that if we're willing to go beyond the surface. And for me, the pandemic became a place where I learned how to do it. We couldn't go outside. And it was hard at first. I'm an extrovert. I love to be around people, but I also realized I like to be around people because it distracts me from me being with me sometimes. And when I had to sit with me.
When you had to sit with you.
When I had to sit with me. Only then could the sage come through and offer me a little empathy.
Come on,
because
you gotta check for yourself, so come sit down.
I'm always trying to sit at somebody's table. I'm always trying to invite somebody to mine, but I needed to sit with me. I needed to be like, you know what, you can't have my chair today because I need it, because I need to sit here right now.
You were like, I've been waiting for you. Welcome.
Well, welcome.
Yes.
And now let's have a conversation.
Let's have a
And- but it
conversation.
wasn't. So it meant quiet. It meant rest. Let my mind stop going everywhere. Let me stop receiving what everybody else is telling me I should be or who I am. And let me find. Sometimes I need to find that little girl, not just let her go. Sometimes I needed to go back and sit with that little girl.
Locate her,
I needed to
locate.
heal her. I needed to
Oh
help
my
mature
goodness.
her.
And
Oh my gosh.
oh, okay,
Go ahead.
No. You go. Really. You have me. Go.
But I think it was
Yeah,
so
no.
interesting, T, when you began and you talked about how you are the harshest self critic. How no one will be harsher on you than yourself. But I think and maybe that is the point of Saboteurs, because if you guys have not noticed, Ramonita and I are best friends, and we often have conversations. And I remember when you told me this, that the person that you speak to the most is yourself. And I think that if we are not mindful of like how we're speaking to ourselves, I literally had to catch myself like the other day because I did not like the way that I dressed myself today. And I was like, I said some unkind things. And then I immediately said out loud, no, Deb, you look gorgeous.
Absolutely.
Affirm. Yeah.
Can I say this to that too? We have to think about, and this is one of the things that, and I'll often say it to young people in my life. I'll say, don't talk to such and such like that when they're talking to themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so stupid. Don't talk to such and such like that. And another thing that I think about is you wouldn't talk to anyone else like you're talking
Exactly.
to yourself.
Exactly.
When we go to work, right? When we go to work or we're talking to friends or whatever, we don't talk to them like, you're so dumb. Why did you do that?
Right.
What were you thinking?
Right.
We
Girl,
don't.
you look a mess.
We don't do that, right? When we're talking to others, we're so generous, we're so kind, and we're so
Exactly.
wonderful. And then we won't give ourselves that same beauty, that same voice, that same, and that's not okay.
I was gonna be like, Miss
That's
Marion, I talk
go
about
ahead.
this all the time. You introduced me to that word of self-compassion.
We won't do it.
Right.
Yes.
And that's not okay.
Right.
I'm glad you caught that, but that is not okay.
It's not.
And it's just like a reminder, I think, of going back to like the Saboteurs, that if we are not active, so breaking it down, bringing it to scripture, have to. When the Bible talks about like the mind, and I think it always talks about words and talks about the way that we think, and very intentional about like those things, because I think oftentimes I love that faith can also be very practical. And so it's like God is telling you, like, as a man thinks, so is he.
So is he.
Revised version, go look up the actual version of scripture.
And if she, so
let
if
me
she,
say this.
Thank you.
As a man or woman thinks in his or her heart.
Right.
heart.
They're
Not just
both
the
connected.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay?
And you think about like, well, what is the emphasis about thinking and in your heart? Because it's about being mindful of like, because everything that we think, like our thoughts like shape like our reality and the way that we show up and the way that we are able to even accomplish the things that God has set us to achieve in the earth. And so like, if our thinking is not right, I almost think of it like, so I have my car.
Yeah.
And I love my car. If you know anything about me, I do not have any children, but I consider my car my child. But I think about like my car, and there's a certain level of gas that Onyx will take. She will only take premium.
That's right.
And if people, I'm like, listen, if you ride it with me, like, we're going to take premium. But I won't allow anyone to put anything outside of premium in it, no matter how expensive it is. But I think sometimes we don't take the same care when we think about ourselves and like the thoughts that we allow to permeate like our being
Yeah, very well.
and like who
Very
we
well
are.
said.
Because it's like, okay, like, even if like, are you allowing those thoughts? Or are you taking them like another reason why like we talked about taking thoughts captive.
Yes.
It's like, okay, if a thought is coming, it's like you can still decide, am I
You
going to
get to
continue
choose.
the path, or I'm going to be like, hey, no, this is going to stop here. But I think that it's really important when you think about like the saboteurs and like the self-talk.
Well,
Because-
and can I say something about that? Because I think like Miss Mary introduced me to this concept of self-compassion, and I call my daughters. I'm like, hey, girlfriend, they're my
Yeah.
girlfriend. And one of the questions that you asked me early on was, what would you say to your girlfriends if she was in this situation? So I had to start naming myself girlfriend. So sometimes I gotta talk to myself like, hey girlfriend.
Yes.
But my therapist introduced me to my inner critic. There's this book called Playing Big by Tara Moore, and she made me name my inner critic. And so I could recognize her when she shows up. And I got to go from what I call the expectationista over here to girlfriend real quick. I got to be like, okay, you need to be quiet. Hey, girlfriend.
Yeah.
Because I need some sugar sometimes. I need to be my soft landing place. It can't always come outside of ourselves.
That's true. That's so good.
That piece, so much to be said there. So much to be said there.
I know, and I wish we had more time.
But you want to go.
We've got to come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got to come back
Yes.
because there's still some, I think that there's opportunities to excavate even more. Something that you said that I want to capture, and that was about being alone with yourself, being able to journal. And I believe that COVID and all of the other stuff, it did give us a gift. And that was the gift to pause, right? To pivot, and to really take time to reflect. That pause is all about reflecting. And when you said that, I was thinking about you being reintroduced to yourself. Because the saboteur will have us live in a whole other life.
Trying to please people.
Exactly.
Be what
And
everybody
being the
else wants to
avoider,
be.
the hyperachiever, but the essence of who we really are is just this opportunity for you and I to just, hello, Mary J., to reintroduce myself to myself, right? I'll never forget my mentor, Dr. Cindy Trim, in our very first one-on-one. She was like, write this down. I was like, okay.
Yes,
She
ma'am.
said, I could not outperform my current concept of self, nor rise above the level of my self-worth. So when that saboteurs, when the sabotaging voices or the saboteurs want to, you got to think about this. You got to think and meditate on it. I cannot outperform my current concept of self. What is your current concept of self?
That's good.
And so that
That's
is something I think we need to sit with. And in our next, I hope you all come back.
good. If you'll have us.
Yes. Yes. I would love for us to come back and finish this conversation. But for today, I want to say thank you. Thank you to each of you for sharing your life, your experiences, your wisdom, and your joy.
I do like to laugh. That is true.
Yeah, because, for me, my mission in life really is to push humanity forward by empowering individuals and corporations to succeed and prosper. And this is just one way that we do it. So thank you again for being a part of that journey with me.
You are doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. So until next time, I know you'll come back because you want to hear the second half of this. So we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, be well.